There's no link on your live.
Okay, just hang on a second.
There we go.
Okay, welcome to Blockchain Breakfast. Every Sunday, as we normally do. Thanks for everyone tuning in, whether you're live or whether you're on the restream afterwards. We appreciate that. We're really happy to have with us a guest from Legaler.com, CEO Stevie Ghiassi. And welcome to the show, everybody.
Hi Ross, thanks for having me on today.
Yeah, no problem. We're really excited to talk about the platform you've been building. I'll just do a quick intro for some of our sponsors, some of the other stuff that we're doing here. Mark Wittenberg is with us as usual, advisor and content manager for Blockchain Business Magazine, advisor for Verge, Exceltrip, and Paysend. Mark, welcome to the show as well. Mark, are you there?
I'm here. Thanks, Ross.
Yeah.
How are you doing, Stevie?
I'm very well. Nice to be here with you guys today.
Yeah, and we want to thank some of our sponsors such as Verge Currency, who's quite active with supporting what we're doing. We appreciate their efforts and their core team, who are a big part of what we do. So Stevie, Legaler.com is something we've been looking at for a while, and you were voted as the winner of our top Blockpreneur of the Year by our readers. Congratulations!
Thank you. It's quite an honor, and hopefully it's something that helps lift the profile of blockchain, specifically within the legal industry. But I've had a lot of people ask me what a blockpreneur is, and so coming to grips with the term. It's going mainstream, but no, it's great to be recognized by peers. So thanks a lot for that.
Yeah, that whole word blockpreneur was, from our standpoint, was thought up by Samson Williams, one of our writers, who we had on the show last week, and he put that together, and he put the who he thought was working hard in the industry, who wasn't a huge mainstream CEO, who's working in the trenches, actually building products that we think are useful, not someone who just ran an ICO, that sort of thing. We thought we'd put people who we think are going to be big influencers in the industry, and you already are, which is fantastic.
Well, I'm a big fan of Samson, so it's nice to be formally anointed by Professor.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, he's busy.
He's a self-professed Twitter lawyer, so Twitter Esquire, as he likes to say.
Yeah, absolutely. So your platform, Legaler, this is fascinating for our viewers. It not only because it's innovative in the features that it offers for the legal community, but we had you on the show obviously because it ties into blockchain and this different vision of trust. Can you tell our viewers how you approach this and develop the product?
Yeah, I think just to preface, I guess what blockchain means to the legal industry and the broader shifts that are happening. There's a couple of things that have evolved since Satoshi's white paper. The gifts, I guess, of that revelation and the technology that is really a confluence of 40 years of real computer science breakthroughs that really came together, and that's why there's such a mystique around the work that Satoshi did, because it really took a polymath to bring these types of different technologies together. And so we've got two real broad shifts. One is the shift in trust, and so we've moved from localized trust, so having different mechanisms for really how we, organize society And so we went from living in tribes and relying on things like kinship and family and really early protocols like language. And then we moved across to what you call institutional trust. And the first evidence of this was the first real types of contracts where we had clay tablets in Mesopotamia 5,000 years ago. And so from there, we've now shifted into a new type of ledger, which really takes us almost back to the localized trust, the peer-to-peer trust. And so that real shift in, it's probably better described as distributed trust, is really one of the key breakthroughs. And as a lawyer, you're really trusted with how you intermediate the relationship between two parties and that trust. And you basically bestowed with, using the law to enforce different types of relationships. So really, when the trust in the shift in trust happens on such a major level, the role of the lawyers is going to change. And just secondly, the lawyer's core commodity. So you're talking about contracts that potentially haven't changed in like 5,000 years. So going again to these clay tablets, the first time we memorialized our relationships with each other, they had some really interesting technologies baked into them. And the ancients probably created Excel before they created Word. So these, like ledgers had columns, a date system, a signature system, like someone stamped in their authority. And really, if you look at what lawyers use in their core commodity contracts, this is the first time we're shifting again to digital connected contracts. So really, two big shifts that I think every lawyer should be paying attention to. And then legalist technology really is hoping to kind of underpin that. So I can get into that a bit more as we go on.
That's fascinating that you can take us so far back and to show us that evolution in how we're using documentation and interaction, because really, our whole society is a crutch to this whole system. And yet it's interesting how, like you said, it hasn't changed in so long.
Yeah, when you look at the history, again, it's more of an anthropological lens, I guess, you take on what's happening here. But if you look at the course of history, every time the ledger's changed, it's really changed commerce, it's changed the way society works. And again, it's been a trust technology that's kind of evolved now. So it really is a huge shift. And I think that's a better lens to look at it from, because when you get into the nitty gritty, it's a bit like the Wi-Fi and internet right now, where we don't necessarily need to know how it works. And, it's early technology, so people are overwhelmed by what it is in terms of fundamental protocols and things like that. But once the internet was consumerized, we weren't really thinking about TCP/IP or how packets, were kind of sent across the internet. We just really cared about what we could do with it. And I think blockchain's still just a few steps away from that. And again, eventually, when we get to the point where we're not really thinking about what blockchain is, and it's a boring network protocol in the background, I think that's when we get to like mainstream adoption. So we're still, again, working on UX, working on ramps, off ramps. The regulatory environment's still uncertain, so we've still got a few steps to go. But I really like how Mark Andreessen talks about the early internet. And again, he was at the coalface, he was there building it, trying to put payment protocols into browsers and things like that. And it took almost a month to get onto the internet in the early days, right? It wasn't a website you could look up to dial in. You actually had to kind of call a number, get your kit and all the rest. So really, if you look at it, there's a lot of similarities between the early internet and early blockchain infrastructure. So, so really, if you see those big tectonic shifts that have kind of occurred, it really gives you more perspective on what this technology can mean and where it's going.
Absolutely. When I was a kid, I got a 1200 BPS modem from a garage sale. That's how I first got it. Well, not really online. I dial up bulletin board systems in my city, and it was so slow. And now it's lightning fast. Is that what's happening with the evolution of documentation within industries such as the legal industry? Is it speeding up because of this?
Yeah, so eventually, right now everyone's focused on, again, the cryptocurrency wars in terms of how much you're saving sending money, more of a remittance tool, actually sending money across the world. Naturally, a peer-to-peer infrastructure, it's far more efficient. But that's not really where the big efficiencies are going to come from, the cost savings. So we're talking kind of, dollars and cents. But once you start really bringing in protocols around business and saving, millions and billions of dollars, that's when the real savings come. And again, protocol is just another fancy word for rules. And so essentially what we're doing is codifying the rules around business. And there's early examples of that where the efficiencies are quite significant. Where if you look at Bitcoin itself, it's probably, you're seeing a rise in DAOs, again, a new type of organization, the decentralized autonomous organizations. You've got now allow, which is a legal autonomous organization developed by Aaron Wright at OpenLaw and a few of the other Ethereum counterparties. But more broadly speaking, you know, if you look at Bitcoin, it's probably the first organization to be run without a CEO. Lets you store value and send value, but you're not necessarily entrusting that with a security guard, a bank teller. So really, it's just a series of code that really binds people and how they act. So that's another example of, you know, where efficiencies are coming in these new types of organizations that are transparent, can aggregate and organize a large group of people to kind of work towards a common goal. So that really, you know, we're using code, and we live in a digital age now, and the internet's the new supply chain. So we're using code to basically, again, going back to trust. Trust is just another way to reduce uncertainty. So we're using code, we're using these rules to actually reduce the uncertainty when we interact with each other. So that's really like, again, looking at the broader shifts as well, these new types of ways that we're interacting. And at the heart of that, when you have contracts, when you have basically these digital promises, and there is a bit of a misnomer, and I think this is why a lot of lawyers are interested in this space, because they hear contracts, and smart contracts unto themselves aren't necessarily a legally binding contract. They can be, but what you're seeing for lawyers is another layer on top. So you've got I guess the programming of you know, code underneath, then on top you've got the legalese. So you're kind of merging natural language on top and creating what looks like a traditional contract, but then you've only got one source of truth. So you're not replicating this in paper and having it sitting in everyone's drawer. You've got one version of the truth, and that can be referred to as a hash, or actually as one type of document where if something goes wrong in the future, you can refer to that. And so the other efficiency that's really evolving out of that is 80% of contracts generally are non-executionary, so they don't actually get executed. Going towards, again, these digital promises that are just self-executing code that no one party is in charge of. When you have a smart legal contract, by default, they're executionary. So you start having these efficiencies, and again, this probably holds up a mirror to both the language of law and working out better ways to get rid of ambiguity. And so gray area is where really lawyers flourish. So now the law's getting homogenized, where it's starting to get codified. You're starting to have this real, I guess, business logic and new types of language, and markup languages evolve, where people are starting to express business and legal logic in code. And so that's forcing both sides. It's forcing us to think about what the law is and what it means, and then how we express that, and then how we enforce that. So it's really, opened a door to a new type of law where, it's referenced as lex cryptographica, which is basically law is the code. So yeah.
That's interesting that you mentioned, that contracts are written and they're not executed. I noticed that myself, when, for example, in real estate, you have a contract and they'll put in subcontracts within that to say, well, if the finance doesn't go through because the bank is slow, then this part of the contract will get executed so that you can pay X amount of dollars per day on, your previous mortgage, because it hasn't closed and blah, blah, blah. And you're right, it's written in this totally, why do we need to have contracts written that are designed to not be executed? It's and on paper for that matter. It's it's interesting how that'll evolve.
Well, we've gone from, again, you call it dumb contracts, where you kind of got a static document which is not really connected to the outside world. But now we've got things like Internet of Things, again, AI, where you're really moving into an age of computational law, where these artifacts that become really live digital documents that are connected to the outside world through APIs. It could be something getting cleared through customs, then automatically paying the other party. It could be upon inspection. But really, what's happening is that we're moving into these intelligent and, again, smart contracts that are really smart. And basically, again, it will bring huge efficiencies. And again, it's very, very early in the grand scheme of things. There's a lot of proof of concepts. As an example, in terms of where the efficiencies can be gained, AXA, the insurance company, developed the Fizzy platform, which was travel insurance. So a party could take out travel insurance, they receive a policy number, that policy is basically paying out if the flight is 2 hours or more delayed. And that's quite an easy oracle to kind of plug into their system. So basically all the flight data, and that's an Ethereum smart contract, which essentially gets rid of the call center, the accounts department, because if the flight's delayed, automatically pays out the insurance policy to that party. Again, a small example, early proof of concept, but it just shows you that once we get better at these things, once we have more trusted oracles and things like Chainlink become more mature, where we can trust outside information that gets fed into an on-chain environment, we're really going to start seeing huge efficiencies in commerce. And again, that's really we're at the early days of that. And I think as we progress, the lawyer's role again will become quite different to what it is now, because you're going to have someone that's going to need to do due diligence on something that's a digital artifact now and a contract. So whether that's a legal engineer, whether that's someone that's versed in legalese, but also maybe has a technical computer science background, you're going to start seeing these new types of roles. So for the lawyers that are out there, and especially this younger generation that's kind of tech native, it's really important, I think, to start getting immersed in that type of technology. Not necessarily having to code, but if you can code, it's a huge advantage, because again, you're starting to see the merging of these two types of technologies, where you've got contract coming into a blockchain environment and being, again, a self-executing agreement.
I was thinking about the learning curve myself just now. I'm thinking, locally here, you look at these lawyers, the demographic, the generation of the lawyers, they're getting younger. They're still a bit older. And I was thinking, how do you simplify the learning curve? Because a lot of these lawyers just aren't going to want to change. They've been doing the same thing for 15, 20, 25, 30 years. They just, unless they're bringing somebody into their office that is younger, they may not be willing to change. And then you just mentioned having maybe a tech oriented person with them. So maybe instead of a lawyer's assistant, we're going to see, like, instead of the assistant, we're going to see a lawyer's tech beside him. But
well, that's already happening.
but how are you simplifying the onboarding process for the learning curve for these lawyers to jump on board? You did mention that it was kind of going to sit in the background, so it kind of sounds like the learning curve isn't going to be that sharp. But how are you simplifying the learning curve for these lawyers?
Yeah, to your point, there's already a changing in the role of let's look at young associates or early entrants into the legal industry, where once upon a time they were sent into the law library with a highlighter to do research. Now you've got very well-evolved AI platforms that can do that work quite easily. So also some of the early work that was the work of these young lawyers is also getting eaten up by technology. So the roles changing, that they can work on more strategic and more business value add kind of, I guess, exercises, but that's also what's happening at the fundamental level. A lot of these mundane jobs are getting eaten up by technology. But to your question about how do you bring them on board, I think the interface, there's a couple of companies working on this really well, like Open Law and Clause, that are specifically working on connected contracts. So they're creating a contract automation technology for this. And ultimately, that application is really just interfacing with the blockchains to really move assets or to trigger events. So essentially, you want to make it even easier than ever for a lawyer to come in and actually be able to create a contract, because again, you've got things like predictive AI that can tell you, hey, 9 out of 10 times this clause was used when this boilerplate contract was used, and then you can kind of really make sure that there's no errors. You can almost, again, predictively suggest the next clause, and then how those clauses interact with other clauses. So really, ultimately, the lawyer's role should broadly shift to more strategic and soft skills, like using EQ and strategy and business skills to actually dispel value to their clients. So the tech should, again, it's just a tool for actually getting an outcome. So ultimately, the lawyer creating the contract should have an easier time doing that. But when it gets to the barrier of thinking about smart contracts, there is quite a chasm there for a lawyer right now to go, oh yes, blockchain-based smart contracts. How do I get my hands dirty with that? And that's where we've done different types of I guess community building and education dissemination to try and help that. And we've got a group called Blockchain for Law, which is about 1,000 lawyers, all from different walks of life, from regulatory, from the largest governing bodies around the world. But really, we've created a community, and it's a vetted community. They come in, and we're sharing information about regulation, sharing information about technology, smart contracts. So really, events, and that's where it's a bit of a self-organizing, distributed community now. Because when we're talking about regulation, everyone entered in the local jurisdictions, framework, and we crowdsourced this beautiful list of all the major I guess regulatory guidance around blockchain and smart contracts. But that's really this early phase of sharing information and getting people comfortable with this technology, and that's why you're seeing most of the law firms just really dabbling in proof of concepts. As Clyde and Co, a law firm that spun out a blockchain smart contract advisory, and they've built things on Clause. Generally, they're using either Hyperledger or Ethereum at this stage. And then you've got in Australia the Australian National Blockchain, which is an initiative with the government's science body, the CSIRO, specifically Data 61, and they've started building a private commissioned, commerce-driven blockchain, where again, HSF, which is the law firm behind it, Herbert Smith Freehills, they've come out with a digital contracts team now. So what you're starting to see is that people are recognizing there's this kind of new door opening, and it's very early again, but they're starting to specialize in getting their lawyers and their team, because they know it's going to be a big point of difference, to be very versed in what is the technology, how to use it, what are the use cases, but importantly, what are the legal ramifications, and how do you actually plug this into, again, a new environment where, similar to the internet when it first came along, people were wondering, oh, how do we deal with this cross-border stuff now? It's out there, and how do we control it? They realized very quickly they could, and there's choke points in different ways. And I think the internet of blockchains is quite similar, where people are concerned about who's responsible for smart contract has a bug, who's responsible for if someone's doing something outside of the law, as you've seen, like some of these dexes, Ether Delta, the developer was targeted. So there is, lawyers grappling with the whole realm of what is a smart contract, how do I use it, is it even legal? And you've also got different legal, I guess, regulatory bodies trying to make it clearer, because that's a big part of the problem. Is not, it's been slow to get guidance on what it is. A lot of people just sit back and say, no, the rules and laws exist now to deal with everything. But in Illinois, there's the blockchain, I think, Technology Act they call it, and they've recognized smart contracts as admissible as evidence. They've recognized it as legally binding, and so there's it's this kind of slow boiling of the frog, where it's all kind of happening from all sides, and we're not really seeing it. But definitely the lines are moving in the right direction, and I think lawyers that get versed in this technology are going to have a big advantage, because as we saw with the ICOs and the token sales, and really this new crowdfunding mechanism, which is not necessarily going away, it's just changing shape. Lawyers also need to know what that means, and what is being sold. Is it a security? Is it a utility? Can the nature of that change at a different point in time? Yes, it can. And so that really, I think for lawyers, there's a lot to grapple with just beyond how do I make a contract. So it's a very exciting time, I guess.
Yeah.
And I don't necessarily think they have laws for everything now. 50 years ago, they may have had laws for everything, but recently, in fact, we hear about it all the time, going into the decisioning level, like for judges, where the Supreme Court is seeing more and more and more pressure now, because with appeals, because judges, there's one judge that's disagreeing with another judge's decision. So I don't think we have laws for everything now, because we're seeing the missed decisions or the not agreed upon decisions rise, right? So, but I'm really curious, like, how this plays a part in every jurisdiction, because I know here where we're from, it's not just lawyers we have here, we have agents as well. Like, when you go into a small claims court, you're allowed to be represented by a super agent. So it's a cost effective for the client. They don't need to pay the lawyer's fees, but they're dealing with a non-lawyer, so they're dealing with a super agent. So I'm thinking, man, your use case is great for even super agents, because these super agents are usually younger. They're younger generation. They're usually younger in age. but they're more handheld. So I know a recent experience I had with my agent. I was texting back and forth. That's most of it was just getting done through text. Very, very, very little paper contract. Now, when we had to review the case, there was maybe 200 or 300 pieces of paper, and I'm thinking, 200 or 300 pieces of paper. And immediately I thought, man, how does blockchain fit into this? And now I'm speaking to a guy where blockchain fits into this. So I'm thinking, like, the ceiling for this is huge, like way up there. Like, you know, and we have
Yeah.
these groups too, like even with credit cards where you can have a side rail to your credit card, like a membership fee, where if you needed legal guidance, you're paying $25 a month or $15 a month. And then when you needed legal guidance, you just call the 1-800 number and they patch you through to a lawyer in your area. And that's another great use case. So like my brain's spinning because I'm thinking of all these different use cases with real estate, with criminal, civil, uh, purchasing anything contractual, purchasing a vehicle, anything.
Well, you mentioned a few things which I'll try and unpack a bunch of them, but there's definitely room for improvement. So our North Star as a company is really, if you look at the different statistics, whether it's from the United Nations, recent statistics from The Hague, you've got 6 billion people that live outside of access to justice. So that's almost the entire world's population. So there's about 7.7 people on the planet right now. And almost everyone is not able to use the law. So our, again, North Star as a company is like using technology to enable everyone to be empowered so they can use the law in some capacity. So that's whether they live outside of the rule of law or they can't access a lawyer. And so to give you, again, just to make it more real, if you look at Canada, USA, Australia, UK, we would say very developed countries, leaders in the free world, 80% of people, so 4 out of 5 people when they have a legal issue can't get help. And again, that's a huge number. So just going to your point about, what do we need to do to actually help more people access the law and be able to use it? Well, the first thing is this kind of early disruption, which is why we started the company. Our vision for legal from day one was one day soon. It's not going to happen overnight, but a technology layer will be the largest provider of legal services, not a bricks and mortar law firm. So right now, if you look at the largest firm in the world, you got Dentons, which is really an outlier now because it's merged with a bunch of big companies. One in China with 2,500 lawyers, but let's just call it 10,000 lawyers. Uber, if you take that as an example, a technology layer, world's largest transportation company. Airbnb, accommodation, far superior in terms of orders of magnitude larger than any hotel group. So really, a technology layer that brings efficiencies, both in connecting people and how they interact, will eventually become the largest provider of legal service, and that's our goal for legal as a company. But it just tells you how much room there is for disruption. There's this huge latent market, and with your point around having an agent, there's already bar associations really introducing new types of laws that referred to as limited license legal technicians, where the Washington State Bar Association introduced them. They're like paralegals on steroids, so they can kind of have a certain remit of things that they're allowed to do legally. And again, it's a lot of the transactional work that really can be done by anyone that has some experience with that type of work. So really, that can help open up a huge market, because a lot of these people can now afford someone that's not $800 an hour, not $1,000 an hour to do their work. Then as you go down the track, you touched on a few points around communication. Most people have the mobile phone, and the early technology we created for legal was to reduce that distance. So something as simple as organizing a meeting takes a ping pong of emails. Then you go download applications, like which application. Most people that are experience a legal issue, they're not really involved in enterprise technology. They don't know much about downloading an app. So really, we created a web portal that works in your browser that allows you to schedule, post, and archive that meeting. Has a real-time chat, has a face-to-face meeting. You record that. It integrates with back office. And then again, just to kind of, it's something that we're working on down the track, is that you now have public and private key cryptography, which can be distributed across a network. And you can have messaging applications that are far more secure than WhatsApp and Signal, because essentially there's nowhere for the keys to be hacked. So you've got this new mode of communication. Legal now will announce it shortly, is is a Thomson Reuters investment portfolio company. And so there's a lot of opportunities within that ecosystem for us to integrate, again, the foundational infrastructure we're building, whether it's communication or the actual blockchain itself, into some of the world's largest, lawyer ecosystems. That's pretty exciting.
That's funny you mentioned communication because I know we're working on the secure messaging system for our app as well for what we do at Verge. So, um, I how is privacy going to play a part in this? No, in this because I know the confidentiality between lawyer and client privileges. How is this going to be protected with contracts or communication back? I guess that's my. I have two questions though, but the first one is how is the privacy going to play a part in this for confidentiality?
Yeah, so obviously the big acronym that always goes off in the lawyer's mind when they hear about blockchain is GDPR. The right to be forgotten, and there are different. Even in Australia, there's existing rules that kind of give the same protections. But California's just come to the table. They haven't fully implemented it yet, but essentially going to have the same framework as what GDPR actually might be more strict. Slowly getting disseminated across the US. And so I guess you need to make a fundamental decision at the start of whatever the use case is, and whether you're going to have private and personal identifiable information available, and you got to work out whether you need to have that sitting in a private, whether it's a database that's not distributed. So essentially, you have a peer-to-peer, transaction happen there where you're only sharing information with the other party. So you got to make decisions around what you store off chain, what needs to be verifiable. Do you hash that off chain data into a mode that can then be referred to again on chain for reference? So really, there's some design decisions around what you create, and again, sometimes when people are using things like IPFS, they're looking at deleting a pointer to some information that's sitting somewhere on a distributed file storage framework. And that also has its concerns as well because encryption doesn't age too well. You've got quantum computing coming. So again, there's lots of areas where I think people need to think about what they put on a blockchain. And again, something sensitive at this stage doesn't really necessarily need to be on a blockchain ever at this stage. But you've got, again, the ability to create a private contract between two parties in a peer-to-peer fashion, have a asset that's in neither of their control sitting on a blockchain, and an event happening between them triggers something again that's sitting on the public blockchain. So, I mean, our view on things is that our own network that we've got up and running right now is a public permissioned network, and I'll dive into that probably as a conversation progresses about what's different about what we're doing there to other blockchains, and how the incentives work for the legal industry. But yeah, to answer your question, it's just a matter of deciding what needs to be on chain, what needs to be off chain, and then having a mechanism to actually remove links to that information.
Yeah, I can see it as saving. This is going to save certainly a whole lot of money. Like but then I think to myself, well, I don't know if these lawyers want to necessarily save too much money because they like the billables, right? And
Well, that's the most that's the back to the conversation we were just having around the latent market and why it's there. The legal industry's had it good for a very long time. It's created somewhat of a cartel
yeah,
where there's been a perverse incentive to use technology. Why would you want to use technology when you're running the bill by hour?
yeah,
But there's a broader shift around that. So the legal industry is heading towards value-based pricing,
yeah,
fixed fees. And again, that's coming from not the legal industry going, hey, how can we offer a better service? It's from clients going, hey, we demand
yeah,
this because we can go here now or we can go here. And you're also seeing competition from all other walks of life, from technology platforms. In the US, it's very difficult for I guess the introduction of tech into these law firms because you can't be a non-lawyer partner of a law firm. And we just saw this recently with Atrium, which raised $75 million. Justin Can from Twitch, he just shut down last week because they really struggled to scale legal services as a law firm, and they created two entities. One was a tech firm, one was that raised the money, and the other one was a law firm which ran it. And the job of the tech firm was to disrupt the law firm by creating workflows and technology that brought efficiency. So really, you've got a broader shift in the business model And again, the technology that we're creating, what we want to facilitate is more competition around that. This, 80% of the market is actually solo practitioners. So
Yeah.
in a sense, you can think of that as where, again, Clayton Christensen, where disruption happens. It's in that lower level transactional, eat up the bottom feeder kind of value, and then kind of work your way up the chain. And so really, what's going to happen is you're going to have an activation of this 80% of the market that goes, hey, I went to law school, now I've got a law degree, I'm a solo, didn't really get too much business experience or marketing experience. Now I need people to find me. They'll be using platforms, and then that's where again you'll see this rise of me as a client being able to go to a platform saying this is my problem, getting a bunch of proposals or RFPs, and then choosing the lawyer that's best suited. And again, that in that environment, things like self-sovereign identity become important because you want to be KYC as a client, be in that once, and then move across multiple services. You want to be a lawyer and have full provenance over where to get your law degree. Do you have a valid practicing certificate and things like that? So really, you can see where blockchain tech starts playing into that, and that's before you even get to peer-to-peer transactions, which we can touch on.
I love the concept of changing the mentality of billable hours, like you said, Mark, and to get away from that, and to just to run contracts that if you're billing per hour, how efficient are you? That's a big question. Whereas if you're billing just for contract services, what is the value of the services? I love that argument, because if you cannot create more value in a contract and you have to bill hourly, and then at that point you question the efficiency of things. It's an interesting argument. If we had a new generation of people using a platform like yours, Stevie, where they were extremely efficient and the documentation process was simpler and easier, as opposed to someone who was billing per hour and it was on paper, you had to go see them. Legal contracts alone have just exploded in size. Mark, you said 200 to 300 pages. That's overwhelming. To see this efficiency move forward is required.
Well, listen. Even I bill, like, even for my daily job, I'm billing for service, right? So, I'm for the lack of a better term, all in. I'm all in pricing. So I'm not for my service. I'm not billing by the hour. I'm billing a client. I'm charging a client for my service complete. Whether that takes me 24 hours to do or whether that takes me 50 hours to do, that's not on my client. I'm just billing for that complete service. Now, what I like about here's what I'm finding that's shifting here. I've noticed in the last like 5 or 6 years here, you're getting, let's just take a closing contract, like a mortgage. Let's take a closing contract on a house purchase. You're finding some of these lawyers that are all in pricing at 75% of what you would classify as a normal billing is. So let's just talk in Canadian dollars. You're closing on a house. You find some lawyers at $1,000 to $1,200 to close on a house. You can find lawyers out there for all in at $750 in Canadian dollars. But that doesn't, when you're closing on a mortgage, it's fairly simple. Why would I go pay $1,200 when I can pay $750 and it's really the same service? These guys spin these out 20 a day. So I love the all-in pricing model for sure. And I think to touch back where you were talking about a platform where these lawyers are just coming out of law school and they're looking for clients. When I'm looking for a service, I research, I go online, I look at reviews, I go to Google. I don't take all the bad reviews and all the good. I just kind of blend them and go, okay, what's fake, what's not. But these lawyers are looking for clients, and I think that's where you're going to see some of your servicing explode too, because these lawyers need to pay back their schooling pretty quick. So
that's where again it's happening from both sides. So as soon as you shift to value-based billing, the onus goes onto the lawyer to be efficient, right? So it flips the paradigm completely. So it goes from like, why would I want to use technology to holy shit, I actually need to use every bit of technology because I'm competing now based on fixed fees. And if I go over, then that's my time. So I'm less efficient and whatever. So really, that's where you're going to see this proliferation of legal technology, because document automation, AI research, whatever it is, anything that you can use, communication, being more efficient, meetings, and time in travel. Like if you're a lawyer and you're traveling, often you can charge a client for that travel, but often you can't. So having things like done through video, because it's efficient for a client because they don't have to come and leave and come to you. That also saves the lawyer time, and that's again just going to tools to get a good outcome. And so that then goes to, okay, so what are lawyers now creating? So if the commodity is, and I think I might have mentioned this already, but you have 4 billion contracts created every year across the world. 250 million of those come from the legal industry, right? So, when I go and sign my car rental agreement, that's necessarily an agreement, but not created by a law firm. So you're using contracts across everything you're doing. They're becoming commoditized. I can go online now and, whether it's the user platform like LegalZoom and get something there quite cheap. So a third of all the, I think actually 3/4 of all the companies in California were incorporated on LegalZoom. So it's just an astonishing number. And so what's happening is those contracts are getting commoditized. So now a lawyer's shifting from, it's a productization of their service. And so as you go into like smart contracts, you're probably going to see clients actually using smart contracts for legal means before lawyers actually start using them as a service, because Rocket Lawyer, LegalZoom, they're both integrated with Open Law. Still early, they just created a wallet and they're probably working on this in the background. They've created a way to have a wallet so that when you create these contracts, that you can have a lawyer help you and create a contract on their platform. And so what that means is that I might be signing a lease with the person who's taking over my property through a smart contract before I even introduce a lawyer.
Yep.
And that's really where these things are becoming commoditized. It might be just a matter of filling in the inputs. Again, there's risks to doing that. You want to make sure the smart contract has been vetted, it's been looked at for what is bugs, it executes properly. So there's all these types of risks. But again, that's where new types of roles will start evolving around auditing and reviewing what the contract is. But ultimately, the goal is that anyone can just go and create a contract with that other counterparty really easily by connecting maybe a Stripe, a blockchain wallet, whatever it is, being able to kind of connect a crypto wallet in the background. So that these things just, again, going back to the invisible nature of blockchain, eventually it's just a network protocol. It'll just underpin a lot of these things that we do. And I think, lawyers are going to start, hasn't happened yet, but they're going to start experiencing the competition that every other industry has. It doesn't mean, the top layer of the market, the Dentons, the Baker McKenzies, and the mid-tier, their competition is coming from somewhere different. It's not coming from just technology per se, it's coming from new business models. So the big four, you take, law firms like KPMG, or I guess companies like KPMG, which have 3,200 lawyers across 76 countries, but they have all of these other services within their realms, from auditing, accounting, technology as well. And so they're able to provide a better, more well-rounded service, especially when you start talking about value to a client than just a law firm that's just, got 3,200 just lawyers. So really, there's competition coming in from everywhere across the industry, which is fascinating. But, what we started the conversation with, the core commodity of a lawyer has changed for the first time maybe in 5,000 years. That's a pretty big deal. So I think, they need to be paying a lot of attention to what's happening.
Yeah, this is intriguing. This may take more than one podcast, man, because there's so many facets to what you're doing right now. And I've got, as you're speaking, I've got more and more and more stuff coming up in my brain to ask. And I'm thinking, like, Ross, where we're from Alberta, I think we're the only province in Canada where you can still write a contract on a napkin and it be legal, right? I think
so.
I think we're the only province. We can still literally write a contract on a napkin. But now I'm thinking, like, if I have an acquaintance, say at Bennett Jones, and with what's going on in the world right now, they had to fly to a conference in Toronto, and that conference was canceled as of late. This is now another perfect use case for what you guys are doing, because instead of canceling that conference, they just take it online. That saves, how much time and money does that save the corporation? A company like KPMG or Bennett Jones, when they're flying in 200 to 300 people or whatever they're doing, how much time and money does that save?
I think you're going to see, again, people's hands are being forced a little bit. And there's actually an events company just in the office next door here, and they've had huge cancellations, but they're straight away moving to these ways of communicating digitally. So again, people don't have to be, large groups of people don't have to be in the same room. But I think that's going to create this shift where it'll force people to that domain, and they'll realize, oh wow, this is actually quite efficient. We can still get the same amount of stuff done. Maybe we actually end up connecting with more people because it's just more efficient. Bang, bang, bang. There's less fluff in between, and then you realize, okay, that's a huge amount of savings in travel, expenses, accommodation, and all the rest. So, even as a lawyer, your real strength is advocacy, having the ability to actually, commoditize that and have, in a marketplace your profile with, potentially webinars and seminars or just little video tidbits about advice. That's quite valuable too, and that's really a new type of marketing. So as we move into some of the other marketplaces, we won't really give all the tools to a lawyer to go, well, this is how I can amplify my profile. This is how I can create content. That again, it's similar to like having a Q&A where you normally go and search something that's a bit of legal advice. Well, you can actually go watch a bunch of videos, and someone might say, this is what happens when you get a DUI in California, or this is what you should do when you're setting up a new company in Alberta. So there's really new ways of, again, just plugging ourselves into this digital internet as a supply chain kind of way of providing our service.
I have a friend of mine that sets up media conference rooms here in Calgary. The company's based out of California, but he's up in Calgary here. He sets up media. I don't know what the terminology is, but anyway, he's setting up conference, all the media, the telephones, the screens. He's doing all that stuff. He said since the third week of February, he's like ran off his feet. He goes, I went from like zero to like I can't even keep up. He goes,
Yeah,
so many companies are behind. So many companies now are reaching out saying, get me conference, get me conference. We're losing time. We're losing time. We need to get conference in today because we're
yeah,
canceling a meeting in 3 days. So
that's
that just
fascinating.
that just tells me like him being ran off his feet, and I think it's a well-known company in California. I don't know what it's called. I'll have to find out. But that just tells me that these companies are willing to shift in a hurry. Like for the right
Well,
reason, they're willing to shift.
we've got no choice. And the other thing is more broadly, just in terms of what lawyers are doing, that the role's far more global now as well, because companies are more global. So if you're a lawyer giving advice, you're serving international clients. Just imagine something simple as setting up a company in California. You got like, legal, we set up a company in Delaware when we first established Legal Inc. We needed a US lawyer from Australia, right? So we're based in Australia at that stage, and we needed a lawyer in the US. So this globalization is just becoming more and more common. Sovereign states, in a sense, just start meaning less and less. And again, you can see that with how blockchain works across jurisdictions, whether it's a stable coin working across multiple different jurisdictions as a currency without being affected by local currencies. So really, the nature of what lawyers do, how they need to interact with their clients is becoming more and more global and digital. And so these are just, again, like various means of providing a toolkit for lawyers to kind of do what they're good at, and just try and make that more efficient.
Well,
And the safety of this goes down too. Like um, even now, like you have video conferences for decisions. If you got a prisoner in a prisoner box, he's actually doing a video conference to get sentenced while he's behind bars. So
Yeah.
plays a huge role in safety too, because if you're doing video conferencing and stuff like that, so many decisions can get made over video conferencing through smart contracts or whatnot.
Yeah.
It
We're actually working on
brings up safety as well. There's less interaction there for something to go wrong.
yeah, we've actually been talking to a company that creates. So what you've got is the legal system's overwhelmed, right? So it's not just about having more access to justice. Because if you just did with the existing system, the existing system wouldn't be able to cope. It's not a matter of just plugging more people into it. So small claims is something that really clog up courts, because oftentimes it's actually more expensive than what's at stake. If you and I have a dispute over $500, we're not going to pay $3,000 each for a lawyer to spend $6,000 to go and get a resolution for something that's $500. And so really what we're getting into is now an age of courts as a service, and there's some early projects like Claros and Jura, and they're creating smart contract based basically virtual courts. And so for our own ecosystem, we're working on something called Legal Resolver, which is basically a similar thing. And we're speaking to a company that's already created the infrastructure for the courtroom, but then having it underpinned by blockchain. So imagine in legal as marketplace, you and I are lawyer and client. I hire you as a lawyer. I put, say, $2,000 into escrow for the work that's going to be done. So again, we've already bypassed trust accounting because we're now using digital escrow. So I've got $2,000 of value sitting there that's in neither party's control. Maybe I release $1,000 and you give me some of the work, but that last $1,000 I'm sitting around going, hey, Mark, where's my the rest of my stuff? You on radio silent. Well, then I could raise a dispute, right? And so that $1,000 in a smart contract could be put into this kind of, again, virtual kind of court. and you can pull out a panel of arbiters from the database of lawyers. So you can base it on jurisdiction, based on the practice area, based on the reviews they've received and how active they've been. So you can have a panel now that is completely anonymous, but is really specific to that use case and that area of law. And then they can vote. So they can vote on, hey, three of them say, we've reviewed the details. Yep, Mark didn't provide the last service. And release the $1,000 that's in the smart contract, take out a small portion as a fee, and then go on with it. So that's really where you're going to start seeing, assets and digital disputes, whether it's over a gaming platform or a graphic design or whatever it is, really solved in these virtual courts. And I think court as a service, the court will just become this place where we have things resolved, not necessarily this, again, going back to the bricks and mortar thing. It's not necessarily just going to be a courthouse downtown, and that will drive far greater efficiencies. And again, this is where reputation and all these things that we're working on in terms of building blocks for the legal industry become important, because that arbiter's reputation becomes important. That client that just had a dispute resolved, their reputation becomes important. And having that as a self-sovereign, portable, persistent ID becomes really important across the internet, right? So it's kind of like the first application actually that we built, it's running on our testnet right now, is called Legal ID. And that lets you sign into the application. We'll have the SDK plugged into our meeting tool soon, where you just scan a QR code, passportless entry, acts as somewhat as a two-factor authentication as well, right? So securing your communications. But as you go, forward, that becomes like your Rosetta Stone, and lets you have access to all these different types of services and unlock, different types of, encryption and signing transactions, whether it's a blockchain-based e-signature or whatever it is, or just getting access to your messages. So that really, this infrastructure, Web3, is far superior, where it lets users own their data, their identity, and their money for the first time. And really, if you kind of look at these applications that you want to build, really just a bunch of these new building blocks, new type of identity, new type of payment mechanism, new type of dispute resolution, and then again, peer-to-peer transacting, making things more efficient. So really, that's what we're kind of spending a lot of time thinking about, is how that looks and how that creates more efficiencies.
Will we see this sort of thing in a drop-down menu on Legal with smart contracts at some point in the future?
Sorry, was that, will we see it as a...
Yeah, will we see drop-down menus on Legal to execute smart contracts in the future?
Yeah, ultimately, we don't want to be the ones ourselves creating it. I think what's going to happen is that you're going to have lawyers and engineers creating these contracts, and we're building the marketplace infrastructure for that, and then we want them to be able to actually again list those and sell those and trade those, and then give advice around those and develop those. So that's where we want to create again the infrastructure, the connecting layer, and then it's a byproduct of that.
What an amazing income stream. That's no different than going to Staples, Ross, and picking up like a will kit. When you can go to Staples, you can pick up like, let's see, a vehicle bill of sale or a will kit or an executor kit or whatever you're doing at Staples. The sky's the limit. So this is an extra way of income for these lawyers. So the lawyers are actually, maybe they have a smart contract that they've created, and you could just go use their smart contract that they've created. So I think. And correct me if I'm wrong, all of this stuff is going to be executed through your token. Is that correct? Everything is going to be through your token.
Yeah. So what we're building is it's a little bit akin to an Apple ecosystem, where we see the blockchain as a general purpose, almost like an operating system, because you have this Turing complete kind of virtual machine on top that you can now create applications and if this then that code. So what we're doing is there's like three key layers to what we've got. And so the legal blockchain sits at the bottom of that. And then we've got the legal dev kit, which again, the identity tool, which I mentioned, is both an independent app, so it has lawyer profiles and whatever else, but it's also an SDK that you can go then use for another application that's potentially not a legal app. And then on top of that, you have the output, which is the actual apps. And I'll probably expand on legal aid, which is the first one we're building, because that's really where we're kind of pushing out our first application to that. And I'd like to explain where the inspiration came from that. But really think of it as that type of ecosystem where you've got this lower level substrate, tools to build apps like similar to FaceTime and Apple ID and Apple Pay. But then the output is these applications. So right now, it's quite difficult to create these apps, and everyone's kind of recreating the wheel. And again, the bottom stack of what we do is always going to be open source, completely vetted. But then that last mile is where you kind of capture, I guess, the legal industry specific value. That's kind of where we're creating these new, again, legal ID, legal pay, these building blocks. And so, the example you gave, Mark, of going and buying a will kit, yeah, that's what we've already started seeing is lawyers are productizing their services. So we have, when a lawyer signs up, they create a profile page, it's got booking types. So lawyers come now and they say, okay, 15 minutes free consult, 1 hour document review is this much. So you started commoditizing a service. And then the next step for that is actually commoditizing those products. So then you list, hey, if you want an immigration package, you can buy this. And again, the ones that I guess initially will become smart contract based will be simple transactional stuff that's very if this then that executionable. So that's where we see that. But really, what we're going back to your question around a token, we've thought long and hard about how to create something that's suitable for the legal industry and solves the problem. So the immediate ones are obviously if you're going to create an application that's scalable, you're going to start looking at AWS type of scalability. If you have a marketplace, a social network for lawyers, whatever it is. And so we're creating a domain-specific blockchain. So let's call it a legal industry blockchain that the nodes are public and permissioned. So basically, anyone can apply to be a node from the legal industry, but they're earning their place at the table by doing access to justice work in our other platforms. So really, again, the blockchain's the ultimate incentive machine because you've got this digital incentive that you can create rules around, and no one party's in charge of those that value. And so really we've got an industry consortium that is running a blockchain. So that gives you the speed thing, gives you the efficiencies in transaction costs, but then also it gives you what's important for the legal industry, like really agile and nimble governments, because something changes in the legal industry, those we call them supreme nodes, the main nodes that are involved in consensus, and around that you've got district nodes. They're all kind of competing to kind of be a supreme node, but you don't need proof of stake or proof of work because you're basing it on reputation. You're basing it on an authority that's regulated. But then it's like, what type of reputation and how do you maintain that reputation? Well, we want to activate this army of lawyers to be doing pro bono work. And that's really done through what we're now building through a non-for-profit called Legal Aid. And again, we've got, I mentioned, some of the world's largest law firm and legal technology companies on board for that. And we've got advisors involved from the head of Stanford Law School to payment architect at Ripple, the head of product at Amisa Go, and various other legal industry experts. And so essentially Legal Aid, to give you some background, was inspired by one of the actual law firms using our communication tool. And this is in the very early days when I kind of went down the blockchain rabbit hole. I was in the background talking to Christoph Jensch, who created the DAO, and he turned his focus to charity DAOs. So after that, the hack, he was looking at, how can we use this technology? It's really, beneficial probably for not a hedge fund right now because that's a security, but more so a charity, because you want to see where value is moved through. And to me, that's really its only job, is to have a good outcome for whoever it's serving, to show where that value's come and gone. And so, as an example, in Australia, Charlie Teo, who was the head of the very famous brain cancer surgeon, he left his own charity because he was like, "Hey guys, I've given you an ultimatum. 80% of funds are going to where I don't know," and he went and started another charity. So I think that was really fascinating to me. I was like, okay, so something about these new types of organizations is quite fascinating. But in the background, we had the Salvation Army's law firm in Australia, which was founded by a gentleman called Luke Geary. And Luke's also actually become one of our advisors since. But really, this was the world's first self-sustaining social enterprise law firm where it had two vehicles, like two entities. One was a for-profit. That for-profit raised over $50 million in 5 years just of profit, after it paid all its expenses. That profit went next door into another entity, which was called Salvos Humanitarian. And now I walk into their office as a disadvantaged person off the street, and I've passed the means and merits test. I get free legal services. So essentially created this dual kind of law firm where it was really its only job was to create value to then move across to the not-for-profit arm. And that was quite fascinating. So I was like, hey, you got this higher level access to justice issue that's this massive justice gap, but you've got one law firm in the world that's doing that. And so I guess from our lens as a technologist and technology company, I was like, well, how could you scale that? And really, that's kind of similar to Tom's shoes in the US, where you buy a pair of shoes and someone in Africa gets a pair of shoes.
Mm-hmm.
I was like, well, what if you create this model that was a scalable entity that was just tasked with generating value to then push towards disadvantaged people? And that's where kind of legal aid was born, where I realized it couldn't be legal at doing that because you'd need an office in every city to vet people. But there was already people doing that. And you've got legal services organizations, you've got legal clinics, in different forms all around the world, whether it's immigration, domestic violence, family law. And so really what we're doing now is we're creating a platform that has two jobs. One is to activate an army of pro bono lawyers and better match those with the jobs that are out there, and then reward them with, again, we call it justice impact points, but it's pretty much like a frequent flyer. So it's kind of like digitizing the lawyer's reputation and tokenizing that, and then giving them other value in the ecosystem. So whether it's getting commercial work earlier and coming up hiring searches, whether it's them being a Supreme node, again, going back to this overall ranking of how do you work your way up to a Supreme node, the law firm has to show the impact that they've had. And so the other mechanism that we use for that is the crowdfunding technology. So just say one of those cases is a social justice case or a public interest law case, and you're like, well, okay, we need to raise funds for this for the public, similar to a Kickstarter for law. Well, you can do that through smart contracts, and we call it, proof of impact, where you can actually track the impact of what the case outcome is for the client. So you're more vested in what's happening. As a donor, you can see donor to recipient transparency because your funds are collected into a smart contract, and that work is rendered down through the platform. So it's not an arbitrary number of money you raised, and then, hey, where did that money go? It's actually done in the platform, so it's all on chain. You can see what that work is. So really, like these two mechanisms, just in the first application we're creating, we hope that sets the trend and builds out that early technology. And again, it's done through non-for-profit, so it's really a self-sustaining model. And that's really where the early use cases for our own ecosystem lie. Again, there's a legal token that's the underlying reward for the blockchain. But even that, we had to sit back and really work out, we didn't want to do an ICO, we didn't want to do a pre-mine, and so we really thought long and hard about how do we create something that's not going to be deemed a security? How do we create, a lot of these perverse incentives around the ICOs where there's a pre-mine, it's quite, opaque into where the funds go after that, and how it's used. And so what we've done is we've created an emissions model where the network launches with 0 tokens. And then, as the validator set comes in, they're rewarded tokens ongoing for validating blocks. And so the tokens kind of follow a similar curve to, say, mining Bitcoin, but again, without the computation. And then 5% goes to the legal foundation, which is overseeing the network and, again, is made up of the council of these different law firms and legal services organizations. So really, we get rid of the perverse incentives, we create long-term kind of incentives, we create a support structure that makes sure it's sustainable. And the network itself is completely as malleable as the legal industry needs it to be. If it deemed that worthy of upgrading to proof of stake at some point, maybe after the network's been bootstrapped, it could easily do that, right? Because the network is going to be governed by the people that have the most vested interest in operating that network. So really, we've created, again, something that's going to be efficient, it's going to be fast, it's going to be suited to the legal industry, and it's also activating, again, an army of lawyers at the foundational incentive level. And I'm pretty excited to kind of get that out into the world.
It's interesting how you mentioned, you'd like to promote pro bono work, because to do that, you've got to have free time. And if you don't have a lot of free time, you need to be efficient to do that. So this really helps to push that dynamic.
Well, just imagine you're just more efficient as a lawyer, but the other thing is actually finding that work. So a lot of people, when we have a podcast called Legal Meets, where I interview people from the legal industry and all different walks of life. And usually the first thing they mention is like, how did you get into this game? Is like, I wanted to help people. And so there's not many other industries, like, I don't see graphic designers getting forced to go and help people for free, right? They probably end up doing a lot of work that people don't pay for that's pro bono. But essentially, the legal industry has this kind of mandate, which is self-imposed, and it's a noble one, but it's to actually, and again, you can see how much of a justice gap there is. But what if it was really simple to kind of get matched with that work? So if I'm an IP lawyer sitting here in New York and I care about creatives, what if my phone just went off with a notification and said, hey, here's a case that you might be interested in, and I can actually work on that. When I do work on that, then my reputation is amplified, and I can actually take that with me and then get, again, benefits commercially. that would really create a bit of a movement, and that's really what we want to do. And that's also for the commercial side. We want to actually, again, Uberize both sides of this. This technology layer, the ultimate goal is, again, as I mentioned at the top, we created this company to become the technology layer. Blockchain comes along and makes you question what value you provide in the middle there. So what we're doing now is we're creating a technology layer that connects people, not necessarily being the middlemen ourselves, right? So as you go forward, you're seeing really cool projects like Origin Protocol. You've already got, I guess, platforms like OpenBazaar where you're connecting in a peer-to-peer fashion. So, a platform like an Airbnb doesn't generally create 30% of the value every time when they take that clip out of every transaction that I participate in. And so what's happening now is we're starting to use, again, these trust technologies that we touched on, escrow, digital identity, the reviews around that, dispute resolution being automated and becoming cheaper and more efficient and done by the community. All these things really just reduce the trust tax that we pay. Like, so I pay PayPal right now, a bunch of, a bunch of points to kind of make sure my money gets somewhere for some recourse when that goes wrong, or if it goes to the wrong place or whatever. And again, there's a long list of people that will complain about what's restrictive about that as well. But what we've got now is, again, this peer-to-peer payment system. We've got this peer-to-peer trust system. We've got this all the tools that we need to actually deal with someone on the internet. The internet's original specs didn't create something that had trust protocols around two people interacting online. We now have that, and so it's just really up to kind of the technologists now to kind of build these new kind of tools that really make things more efficient. And it's all there. It's just early.
That's funny you mentioned PayPal. The only reason they are where they are today is riding on eBay's coattails, but they have good marketing. That's what it is, because that service is just anyway. But
if you think about what they both, if you think about what they, excuse me, what they both, eBay and PayPal, they're an intermediary.
Yeah.
So their role is getting questioned now, because again, if you can go into a peer-to-peer age, what's going to happen initially is that you're going to see these platforms like Square, Stripe, and whatever retrofit blockchain technology, and then it's a bit like Andreas Antonopoulos frames this stuff really well, where it's like we had a new type of infrastructure that came initially. Let's take horse and carriage in cars. You had cars front-wheel drive running on shitty muddy roads, and everyone laughing because you had someone waving a red flag and running in front of them with a horse. And so when you went to a concrete road, everything could kind of move really fast, really efficient. So you had a new infrastructure. We're still grappling with the old infrastructure. You still hear all the comparisons to, oh yeah, blockchain will be great when it reaches 30,000 transactions per second, like a Visa or a MasterCard. They're really poor comparisons because they're not running at the same level of infrastructure. So anyway, there's a lot of room for improvement.
But the legal aid aspect is very cool because, I personally know a lawyer. He was a top rated lawyer back in '95, but he was doing legal aid back then. And there's no doubt that these lawyers are making $800 an hour to take on cases. The reason they usually do legal aid and is for airtime. They're going to take on major cases for legal aid. So, the double murders, the triple murders, the really high level, high media, high impact, those cases, that's where they take on legal aid. Sure, they're losing money, but the airtime they're getting from it, and it goes back to your point, where you're going to create that system, or you have that system where they can kind of go on the way up. So legal aid is going to be a major part of that, because as they're taking on these major cases through your system, through legal aid, they're going to move up. So absolutely, the smarter lawyers are actually cherry picking the proper legal aid cases, right?
Well, makes it, so again, one part of that is discovery, so making the discovery of those cases more efficient. But to your point, you've got law firms that are extremely busy, so they really want to cherry pick the cases that fit within their their thesis and their mission, their values. Some law firms won't touch certain cases because it doesn't fit in with the values of the law firm, or they don't want to project a certain public image. And so really just making that more efficient and then tokenizing that reputation around that. And again, what's exciting is blockchains are just the ultimate incentive machine. So, we've thought long and hard about how can we kind of activate this army of lawyers to kind of do good. and be rewarded for that good again, because they are doing something that they're not necessarily obliged to in a sense. Yes, the bar associations, I think the American Bar Association prescribes 50 hours per fee earner per year, and just tracking that is actually hard. Just for law firms to show that is quite difficult. And then you've also got these let's call them clearinghouses, where they're working on some really crazy cases against governments sometimes, in war crimes and all types of things. They have to then go to their stakeholders because they rely on donations to show their impact. So having this on this platform where again it's all tokenized on chain in terms of the work that's been rendered, so you finally have like an accurate output of what's being done. That helps them then go and get further funding, right? And then show to their stakeholders, hey, this is the impact we had, these are the cases we did, and these were the outcomes. And then having that, just in a simple dashboard, being able to have the reporting, then helps them kind of be more efficient and then go get more funding to have more resources to hopefully have an even greater impact.
I think, Ross, and this is to Ross. I interrupted you along earlier, Ross, so I apologize for that. I meant to apologize earlier because I interrupted you, and I apologize for that. But I think, Ross, we almost need to split, like we almost need another podcast to keep going with the extra arm of this service from Legaler. Like, there's so much we couldn't touch on, but there's so much we need to touch on.
That's true.
For Legaler. Like, I think we almost need to do like a series, like where we do like a follow-up series for Legaler, because they've got so many fascinating avenues. If you guys execute on everything you're trying to execute on, this is big. It's a massive service.
Yeah, so if you look at the legal industry, again, going before you even unlock the latent market. So we've said that it's only servicing about just over 1 billion people on the planet, right? So that's talking about the highest net worth people and the most privileged people on the planet. That's already a $1 trillion market, right? So and then go, which other industry is underpinned, or the core commodity is contracts. So we said 4 billion contracts created every year, 250 million of those are from the legal industry. So you've got this huge shift where, again, you're going away from value, we're going away from running the billable hour. So there's lots of cost pressure there. You're going to your core commodity changing. You're going to the nature of trust changing. So all of that, like, coming together, like, you're going to see a huge shift in what the legal industry looks like within the next 5 to 10 years.
Yeah.
And really, that's where if you look at we've got one slide in our presentation where it's basically like the legal industry use case, and that kind of starts with smart legal contracts, marketplaces, e-signature, reputation, and identity and things like that, certifications. And then you start looking at things like financial products, like you got this huge DeFi movement where, again, you're going to have like financial products where me as a client, I go, hey, I can't afford that $2,000 for a smart contract wheel, but maybe I can pay you $50 a month or something, or whatever it is. You can have products off the back of that. Think about within legal, and in the future, as an organization, it's a separate entity. We want to have the tools to create litigation funding, so you can have a tokenized fund that people own that gives power back to the people, and they can vote for what to do. So it might be a large group of people saying, hey, we've piled in all our money and we want to sue Volkswagen for emissions fraud because that's polluting our environment. And you might do that because the payout is $100 million from that $5 million, right? So there's a commercial benefit there, and the token may well be even security, and you might basically pay dividends to the people. But for the first time, you've given people back the power line. It's like they've been alive thing where you can actually take on anyone in the world about anything that's a social justice movement, because you have a large group of people that have a vested interest in kind of aggregating these funds together to then move, right? Going back to what these protocols are, like just rules around how we interact as humans together, and you create protocols around a litigation fund, then can be, charged with going and doing good for the world. So that's really, again, like, there's a lot of room for improvement within what's happening in the legal industry.
It's funny. I've got a 21-year-old son and a 5-year-old son, and I'm so fascinated to watch them both grow, to see how blockchain is going to affect both their lives, because there's such a vast difference between their ages. There's 16 years between their ages. So if I'm involved in blockchain, then my 21-year-old is going to have to be involved in blockchain throughout his, it's going to be forced to use the blockchain for some parts of his life. Yep. I think my 5-year-old growing up is going to be it's going to be almost 100% blockchain by the time he reaches my age.
I think so, because you're going to have, again, like starting with identity, because the internet was created, for machines to talk to each other. Now we've got to wedge ourselves in the middle there. So self-sovereign identity an identity we own, one that we control, one that we can benefit from, whether it's selling data. That's going to be native, right? And whether it's centralized authorities like governments issuing them, we're just going to have layers of this attestation that we kind of put towards our identity. So for your son, it's going to be like it's going to be a commonplace, right? And this is the great part. There'll be a tipping point, right? There's network effects in everything. There'll be a tipping point where once we have open source technology that works really well, that's been proven, and again, that we develop more trust to, you're going to have people demanding that, hey, I need to use my self-sovereign identity in this platform because I don't want to give you my data into a centralized store or whatever else. You know, people interacting in marketplaces going, hey, I can get this, this same interaction for 1% for a payment fee where you're charging me 25%. So what's going to happen with the market is as you get to a tipping point and this technology proves itself out, people are going to demand that, hey, I want to use and interact with this better type of technology. And that's where maybe you could say Facebook is potentially doing something kind of smart where they've gone, okay, we've got to hedge our bets here. People have lost trust in us. Can we employ a trust technology? And again, it comes down to how centralized that is and how democratized the control of that network or the tools are, or the Libra wallet or Calibra or whatever. But essentially, they're trying to get into that game. They're realizing that there's this new type of technology that has these benefits, and how can we get that out? And to be honest, I think the early adoption of this tech is not going to come from the law firm just doing smart contracts. They'll have a higher chance of using something like legal aid because there's not much commercial tech in that sector. But because it'll be easy to get an identity, it'll be seamless, it'll be easy to get those reputation points, but they're not really kind of doing it in smart contracts yet. But then it'll be games. You're going to have like now, Barcelona, Juventus, all these soccer teams are doing, collectibles around, assets. So your son will probably, when I was younger, collecting basketball cards, and now look at them and go, oh, it's a piece of cardboard. It doesn't really mean much. They're going to have these digital assets, right? And those digital assets will have properties like crypto keys where they can merge and create new kind of funky things. That's going to be kind of cool. And I think the adoption from blockchain that goes mass market will be some AR or VR driven game where we're running down the street like Pokemon Go and chasing some crypto asset because someone's done a massive airdrop, and it's just a wallet I download on my iPhone. And that's where I think, again, like the early, sounds crazy, but I think that's where the early adoption will come. That's when I've got my wallet. I kind of, again, I start using blockchain without really thinking about it too much. So I think that's really, it's going to be something that your son's just going to use as a digital native, blockchain native, young kid.
That's funny because I still collect hockey cards and comics myself.
Yeah, I have all of that stuff, and I trained when I was in my past life. I was playing tennis, and I used to train in Florida, and I got the chance to train with Kobe Bryant when he was a rookie. He came into our Adidas Performance Institute, and he signed his rookie card for me, and I had his card sitting somewhere again with all the Jordan ones and all that stuff. So I was well into that, and I think even on a family trip to Canada when I was 14, the Mighty Ducks had just come out, and so I bought just boxes and boxes of hockey cards and took them back to me. But they're useless now. But for me, like in terms of when I say digital assets, and I go, oh wow, what if you can have this online tradable, marketplace and again merge assets and things like that?
Well, Tops just digitized. Remember the Garbage Pail Kids?
Yep.
Cards. They just came out with an announcement where they have the online Garbage Pail Kids. So it's digitized Garbage Pail Kids cards with Tops.
That's what you're going to see is like you're going to see these companies retrofitting these like old things that we have attachments to. Collectibles, brand names, and they're going to come and create these digital assets.
Yeah.
And again, like you don't have to be Nostradamus to see where it's going, but basically that's really where you're going to have kids playing in games, earning assets, and going, cool, I can now trade this asset for something else, somewhere else, right? Because it's running on a blockchain on one distributed network. These things can move across quite easily. Whereas right now, you might have credits and earn and buy, Fortnite skins and whatever else, but they're kind of quite siloed. And so what you're going to have is that, again, people, the users, demanding, I want blockchain tech because I want to own this thing. I want to own this digital asset. I want it in my wallet. I want to be able to sell it, and I want to be able to control it with my private keys. So that's really where I think, the network effects, once we get to that point, it's already happening, but it will really accelerate within the next, I think, year or two, because you're going to have, there's an Australian company that's created, what's the name now? They got a bunch of, I think Gods Unchained was the first one. They got these games that are just, really cool, real player, and you're basically earning these crypto assets in the game. So you don't even have to have blockchain knowledge before you get to the game, play, earn. And again, that's where you're pulling an asset out of this game environment, which is quite unique. So I think people are going to get their first taste and their first touch of crypto assets through that type of experience.
Yeah, absolutely. So, going back to your company, I wanted to share with our viewers your Blockchain for Lawyers ebook that you have on your website. Can you tell us a little bit about that? It's a little bit of a help with the learning curve.
Yeah, that actually there's a Forbes article on that ebook because it went viral. It was last. It was a Christmas prior, and I recall wanting to go on a holiday for the first time to switch off over the last few years to go. You know what? I'm going to spend Christmas and turn off all the bit of a digital detox. And just right as I was heading to beautiful Byron Bay in New South Wales in Australia, the LinkedIn post went viral, and then it just went crazy. So I had to hire a team to help me manage all the inbound traffic. But I think it just showed again, there's misnomer, smart contracts, lawyers thinking contracts, not necessarily smart, not necessarily legal contracts, but it does become part of the conversation. What is this? So really, it was off the back of the Blockchain for Law group as well. We created just a bit of an ebook to kind of, again, as we touched on, there's so many touch points and use cases for the legal industry to start caring about, building, to start becoming knowledgeable about. A lawyer, again, your core commodity is a contract that's changing for the first time. So really, it was something that we just wanted to put out a bit of literature around how can you get more familiar with this technology. And it was, quite high level. I didn't get too into the weeds. It started off again with the history of money and these types of things. And so, cryptocurrency and all these new types of tech, they're really bringing together a few things that people don't really know too much about separately, like financial systems, economic systems, monetary policy, and it's quite complex and it's quite overwhelming. So what we want to do is just pull apart what it means for a lawyer, explain smart contracts and things like that, and really. Again, it was a good opportunity to invite those people into our Blockchain for Law group as well. And in the future, we'll have, I think, more of a central hub of news and regulation and things like that. Because again, it's becoming such a fast-moving thing. Like these, even for lawyers, it's really hard to keep up with. What did the SEC just say about the safe harbor? What's happening with ICOs now? What is a utility token? What is a security token? All that type of thing. So really, the ebook was just a means of getting something out there that could kind of help lawyers just take a bit of a bite into this new world, and it worked really well. And we've had other lawyers now translating it into different languages. I think we've got a Portuguese one ready to go that can now send out to that part of the world. So really, there is I think a lot of interest from the legal industry and the lawyers. As we said a few times today, it's just early proof of concepts, early dabbling with this and that. But there's a whole new door of legal work that's opened up, and some of our advisors, one in Australia particularly, have become the focal point of this industry for both the advice and on panels and becoming thought leaders, because it's a new sector that's really opened up. And if you can specialize in this, in knowing the regulatory environment for where should you set up a foundation to start a blockchain company, how should you sell this token, whatever it is, and how should you kind of play along with a new safe harbor kind of I guess it's just been proposed, it's not into law, but how do you work around that? Should you wait? And so this is really stuff that lawyers can be helping clients with, a new area of law called blockchain law, and essentially we want to be helping lawyers get more and more familiar with that type of technology and that area of law.
Well, we're excited to hear of your updates as things develop. If you can come back on the show, or to give us some updates on how the legal industry is adopting your platform, the cases that are having efficiencies, we would love to hear that and share that with our readers.
No, I'd love to. We've just hit about 2,500 law firms on legal over spread about through 100 countries. So primarily Canada, US, UK, Australia, like in terms of our main market. But really, again, this it's a global movement. So we're excited to be a part of it, and happy to come back any time. I've still got my chocolate croissant here, which I haven't had.
It's breakfast
but,
time.
but yeah, happy to chat with you guys anytime. So let me know. And again, thanks for the recognition. Really appreciate it.
Yeah, it's very good. So yeah, we appreciate that, Mark, Stevie. Thanks for your time. Great putting the podcast together. And for everyone looking for the next issue of our magazine, we'll have an interview with Stevie with a few more questions that we'll send off to you, and we'll share on April 1st.
Look forward to it.
Very good.
Stevie, thank you. I very appreciate all your time. And just a shout out to, I know we missed it, but to all the females in the world today, it's Happy International Women's Day to all the females in the world. And I wanted to give a shout out to them because they're very special. And as we know, without our mothers, there's no us, right? So, and for some of us, without our wives, there's no us. So anyway, big shout out to all the women in the world today. Happy International Women's Day. But Stevie, it was a pleasure to have you on. Like I really want to stress to Ross, I think we've got to run another cycle through, like maybe another couple, because there's so many different avenues to legal, or I think we only touched on 10% of it.
Yeah, no, like I said, and I echo your sentiments. And there's some amazing women, especially in the blockchain industry, leading the way too, which is super cool, and the legal industry. So I'm happy to come on anytime. Like I said, there's we want to create this foundational infrastructure that really goes beyond even the stuff I've mentioned, right? There's going to be things that we haven't even thought of, and really it's exciting to be able to lay those tools out so that others can come and kind of start creating new ways to reduce the justice gap, and again, and help empower everyone to kind of use the law.
Absolutely. Very good. Well, thanks, guys. We'll post this, we'll retweet, and we'll put the links into legaler.com for people who want more information, and we'll talk soon. Thanks very much, guys.
Okay, thanks, Stevie.
Have a great day.
Bye.
And a shout out to our sponsors and partners. We want to thank Ghiassi Magazine and David Gockstein for being a part of our podcast. We also want to thank the Manny Pacquiao Foundation as well for working with us, and excellent organization that's doing some really great things through their donations with cryptocurrencies, including Bitcoin, Litecoin, Verge, and Ethereum. So go to PacquiaoFoundation.org for more information there.